So you can look at a sort of a spectrum of systems or situations from things that are very ordered and very stable to things that are very unordered and unstable. And sort of arbitrarily pick a midpoint between the ordered kind of things and the unordered kind of things. And then break this further into 4 categories. Simple systems where the answers are indeed already known. So all you have to do is, oh, I'm in that situation, I'll take that answer off the shelf and I'll use it. A little less ordered is a complicated situation. The answers aren't already known, but they're very knowable. All we need is the right experts and a little bit of research. And then we can figure it out. But then you cross that boundary. You get in a situation where there really aren't any answers. Your experts aren't going to be able to figure them out. All you can do is get into the situation and begin exploring and discover what are the patterns that apply in that situation. And then you have full-blown chaotic situations where there are no answers even to be found. It is truly chaos. Now this is a great, hold on a second. How do I get the audio on this? I thought we were just going to have audio. We'll give it just a second here, and while he's plugging this in, this is a video that I think illustrates those types of systems better than anything I've seen. With a simple example of the children's birthday party. So I'm going to allow Dr. David Snowden to do the speaking on this.
Let's imagine, if you can, that you've got to organize a party for a bunch of 11-year-old boys, and you want to apply the 3 different types of system that apply in nature. Well, if you assume the party's chaotic, the children are acting at random, you might as well buy the drugs and alcohol so the children can go on a personal experience of self-discovery. Your house may burn down in the process, but what does that matter? All property is theft, and it was socially constructed in the first place. I have friends in California who've tried this. I don't recommend it. The recovery cost is high, but it's a legitimate approach. On the other hand, the one we'll be more familiar with is the ordered systems approach. Here, it's of critical importance to construct clearly articulated learning objectives in advance of the party itself. The learning objectives should, of course, be aligned with the mission statement for education in the society to which you belong. Ideally, you should print the learning objectives off on motivational posters with pictures of eagles soaring over valleys and water dropping into ponds, and place those around the room where you're going to hold the party. You then produce a project plan for the party. The project plan should have clear milestones throughout the party against which you can measure progress against ideal party outcome. Once you've done that, the senior adult can start the party with a motivational videotape. After all, you don't want the children wasting time in play which isn't aligned with the learning objectives of the party itself. And then they should use PowerPoint to demonstrate their personal commitment to the objectives of the party and to show the children how pocket money is linked to the achievement of the milestone targets. Now, of course, the third approach, the complexity approach, is even simpler. Here we draw a line in the sand known as a boundary in complexity theory, and we turn to the children and say, cross that, you little bastards, and you die. And one of the things you learn pretty fast as an adult is the value of flexible, negotiable boundaries, because rigid boundaries have a habit of becoming brittle and breaking catastrophically. We then use catalytic probes, and I'm deliberately using the jargon of complexity theory now. Football, a videotape, a barbecue, a computer game, something which will stimulate a pattern of activity which is called an attractor. And if it's a beneficial attractor, we stabilize it, we amplify it. If it's a negative attractor, we dampen it or destroy it fairly quickly. So what we do is we manage the emergence of beneficial coherence within attractors, within boundaries. And in that simple phrase, we see the promise of complexity theory for organizations and government alike.
So when we're dealing with a system, one of the first decisions that we need to make if we're going to take advantage of this thinking is to decide where does that system fit in this spectrum. Then we can think in terms of rotating this into sort of a two-dimensional form and breaking into quadrants, so to speak. And then, of course, we place the system within the quadrant. Now, these quadrants have characteristics. So in the simple characteristic, again, that's the one, simple, well, they call it domain, but it's a different use of the word domain than we typically use it in software. In the simple domain, the idea is you just sense what situation that you're in and categorize it, and then you can apply the information that's already available off the shelf. In the complicated domain, let's see, do I have, yes, good, I've got a laser. In the complicated domain, you still have to sense what kind of situation you're in, but because the solutions are not available off the shelf, you have to do some analysis, bring in some experts and so forth, and then you respond based on what they determine. In the complex world, you don't know what situation you're going into. The only way you can figure it out is to probe, to conduct experiments, to discover what kind of patterns really apply in this area. And then the chaotic, all you can really do is you say, okay, I'm in chaos. There's no way to know what the situation is. So I will act. I will observe what happens. And my goal is strictly to move out of chaos. Typically, you'll move either into the complex domain or you'll move into the simple domain. By the way, that's the dictator solution, right? A country goes into chaos. A dictator rises up and says, I have all the answers. And everybody just throws their hands up and says, you got it. Examples of types of systems that fit in these domains, for instance, double entry bookkeeping has been understood for 100 years. So you just take the solution off the shelf. If you have to develop some code for a double entry bookkeeping system, you just do it. The field I work in with aircraft, aerodynamic systems for a new aircraft, things are different because it's a new configuration. There's new outer mold lines and performance and so forth in the aircraft. So you need your experts and you need some research, but the solution is very findable. It's very understood, the math behind it. A complex thing would be like, for instance, when you have terrorism. There's weak signals on the internet that may indicate that a terrorist attack is coming. How do you detect those? Well, it's patterns, but you don't know exactly what those patterns look like, so you have to get in and kind of experiment with them. And then chaos might be a situation, for instance, where two companies merge. And what's going to happen is very much going to depend on what each of the actors do. You know, a leader in one company does something, it changes the whole situation. A leader in the other company does something, it changes the whole situation. It's just very chaotic. The evolution of systems development began with this scientific management notion, with Frederick Taylor, for instance, back around the beginning of the 20th century. And it's a simple domain sort of a thing. Let's just get the information and we'll apply it. That developed into the systems thinking approach, which is more of the complicated domain, where experts in research are more what's involved. And that's sort of run out of steam. All of these things, of course, are S-curve life cycles. That's run out of steam. And then, so now we're into the sense making, which is talking about you get into a complicated situation with lots of actors, with lots of, as Daniel Pink said, different motivations, different purposes. And you have to kind of experiment and find out, well, what are the patterns that apply in this situation? And that has the legs to take us to the next level. So, in the complex domain, that's where you get into this situation of directed emergence. So the agile world has really, locked on to the notion of emergence and rightly so. I think, pendulums always swing too far. And I think in some of the agile world, there's been this notion that we don't need any planning ahead of time. We don't need, things like architecture and so forth. But that of course, is the extreme in that movement. But the idea that emergence is needed is absolutely, by this model, is absolutely correct. It's what we need to leverage and take advantage of to be able to develop systems that better match the characteristics of all those human beings, those messy human beings that are involved with them. So people that, the way people function in each of these domains can kind of be summed up these ways. As much as I hate to admit it, there is a place for bureaucrats. They're the people that sort of enforce the simple solutions to the simple problems. And that's what they specialize in. In the knowable domain, you have your experts who can sort of, it's a knowable situation, but they can explore, not explore, wrong word. They can determine what how to apply the knowledge to the situation to solve the problem. I like to think of people that work in the complex domain as explorers. They don't really know what they're getting into, but there is an assumption that there's some structure there. They just have to discover it. And finally, in the chaotic situation, people who do that are firefighters. They're just throwing arms and legs each different way, axing, doing whatever it takes to try to make the situation better than it currently is. So in the real 3.0 world, as opposed to the imaginary Mr. Smith, 4.0/3.0 kind of world, if we think ontologies will get us where we need to go, then what we're really saying is that our experts who develop the ontologies can understand the situation sufficiently well to create patterns for us that will take us, will get the job done. That's really a complicated domain mindset. Or another way of looking at it, this is some screenshots from some software from the company of the guy that did the talk on the children's party. And there's some involvement here in crafting the right questions to draw out stories from the people that will be using the system, the people of interest, dividing those stories into bits, aggregating those bits, and finding the patterns in there. And eventually, there is a math that goes behind this. This can be actually graphed. And this picture here is of what happened when they did that with people in Afghanistan. What they found out, there was some of the belief structures and story fragments that the people had were very deeply rooted. And you really couldn't change those. But some of them were quite changeable. And those were the ones that needed to be focused on if, for instance, one was going to help bring forth democracy and self-governance and those kinds of things. So it's a very real-world application. But see, it's a very different notion than just coming up with a taxonomy and then applying it. So that's the realm of explorers and the complex domain.